Now, NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio with Lee Witting, whether you're listening on TalkZone, by podcast, through the archives of our ad-free shows on our YouTube channel, or connected through the incredible content of our Facebook page. Our guest today, Dr. Lotte Valentin, was radically changed after the first of her two near-death experiences following the birth of her third child in 1992. As an atheist prior to these spiritually transformative events, Dr. Lotte did not believe that the soul survived physical death, that the afterlife existed, or that the spirit world was real. What followed were the slow steps forward to regain her health and the beginning of her spiritual quest for answers. Dr. Lotte jokes she must have read half of the San Francisco Public Library in her quest to understand how the universe works. Seeking to make sense and understand her experiences, she sought out different spiritual teachings and practices, religions, quantum physics, and scientific theories about how the soul and the universe work. Over the years that followed, Dr. Lotte's experienced the emergence of her intuitive abilities. She started receiving messages from her spirit guides, communications from the spirit world, and future premonitions about events that were to come. She further strengthened and refined her skills by studying shamanism under shaman Itzhak Beery and attended Arthur Findlay College in England, which has been called the world's foremost college for the advancement and spiritualism of psychic sciences, where Dr. Lotte studied and trained in mediumship and trance healing, as well as spirit portraits. Dr. Lotte is author of the Audible book, Science with Soul, and also hosts a podcast of the same name. Dr. Lotte Valentin, welcome to NDE Radio.
Well, thank you so much for having me. The title of my book is actually Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul.
Okay.
So just to get that right. And it's about the spiritual transformation that took place and how I ended up going to medical school after all this at the age of 54. So it's a long story, and there's one chapter in the book about what it's like to be that 54-year-old person in a class that has an average age of maybe 30, 33. So in a sense, it felt like I was going to school with people that were the ages of my own children at that time.
I know what you mean. I went back to seminary at about the same age after years of other work. Lotte, you said you were an atheist before your NDE, but did you have any spiritual training or insights when you were a child?
Yes, both. It's kind of a funny story. So I was the fourth child. I had three older brothers. My father was a general practitioner, and he had grown up going to Sunday school since he was about 3 years old. And he was actually on the board of the church. And in Sweden, where I grew up in Scandinavia, everybody was Lutheran back then. So if you were born, there was no separation between state and church. So you were born, you were a Lutheran. And if you didn't want to be a Lutheran, you better tell someone. So when we were children, we actually went to the church to get our passport. They were the ones that kept track of all the people. And I was confirmed when I was 14 in the Lutheran church. And I really did not believe anything that they taught me. And I said, this is just like a story. There is no spirit world. There's nothing beyond my, just my being here in the physical world. And I thought that when you die, it's just black. It's like, you kill a fly and he's not here anymore. And that's the same thing for us people. So I really had no spiritual beliefs at all. But at the same time, I had all these spiritual inclinations. So I would see auras around people. I remember telling my brother that there is a man in the flame of the candle. And I said, it belongs to grandma. And he said, I don't know. I don't see it. Where is it? And so there was, I had all these spiritual inclinations as a child, but I didn't believe in any of it. And it turns out that my grandmother was very spiritual, my mom's mom. And I'm pretty sure she must have had several near-death experiences herself, because when I was a child and she was in her late 50s, early 60s, the doctors would always say, we have no idea why you're still alive because there were so many pieces missing of her
Oh,
organs. And so she had been, I know, near death many times. She had many different ailments of her intestines and stomachs. And I don't know all of it, but I just remember going to the Karolinska Hospital in Stockholm a lot because my grandmother seemed to be in and out of the hospital my entire childhood. So I'm wondering how much of her spirituality actually came from that. And she would tell me stories of how, the bird flew into the window in the middle of the night, and I know this person, this particular person, passed away, and now we have to, call this person.
mm.
So I think there was a lot of spirituality part of that came from that. And I've been told when I studied mediumship at Arthur Findlay College several times, I've been there many, many times. And I'm always told by my teachers, and even when I studied shamanism with Itzhak Beery, yeah, that you were born this way. You're a born medium, and it comes back over and over. And it makes you think back to all those spiritual experiences I had as a child, but at the same time, I said, it's not really there because I would tell my brother or I would tell my friend, do you see the aura around the flower bouquet on the table? She would look at it and say, no, what are you talking about? So I think as a
Oh,
child, right, you learn uh, they're not seeing what you're seeing. My brother couldn't see it. My best friend couldn't see it. And I think the funniest part of all of this is that my friend who didn't see the aura around the flowers on the table, we have studied mediumship together several times at Arthur Findlay College.
does she see the auras now?
She doesn't see the auras, but she's a good medium, and she became an artist. She studied a lot of art through Arthur Findlay College. She started as a medium, and she's a nurse. So, and we spent, every day of our childhood together. We grew up, we knew each other since birth, and spent every day together. So it's really interesting, but that connection was not made until I had been to Arthur Findlay College the first time, which was in 2017. And then I met her in Sweden. We hadn't seen each other for a couple of years, and I was home visiting my family. And I told her about these experiences, and she looks at me and she said, Mom had all these experiences. She's in a home now. She's really old. She's got a little bit of dementia going on. But she said she left her body and she went to the other side. And they told her that it's not your turn yet. You have to go back and put all your papers in order. And then literally she passed away, 6 months or 12 months later.
Wow.
And so she became interested in it. And so we ended up studying mediumship together. But it's interesting, right? Because she didn't have those same experiences, but then she still was a medium. So it
Yes.
doesn't mean, we don't become mediums because we have a near-death experience. I never met anybody else who is a medium who had a near-death experience, studying at Arthur Findlay College. And that was just what I signed up for, I think, in this life. That was my journey to be
Yes.
that way.
Different gifts at different times for different
Mhm.
reasons, I think. Lottie, giving birth to your third child in 1992 was an epic in itself with a 7+ California earthquake going on and power outages at the hospital, and then afterbirth hemorrhaging. But I'd like to skip to the 10th day after your daughter's birth during the baby shower of all times, when you were rushed off to the ER with more hemorrhaging.
Yeah, so I started hemorrhaging on 10 days after her birth, and I didn't understand why this was so different than my other two births. I had two boys at the time that were 6 and 3.5,
Mm.
and then my newborn daughter, who was just 10 days old. And I started hemorrhaging. And so we went to the ER, and I get there and they do a manual inspection, and they say, well, it doesn't seem like there's that much bleeding going on now. We'll keep you for observation. It could have been a second lining that came out. And there was no ultrasound, no blood work. This is 1992. I hope they do that today. So they just left me there for 2 hours, and they said, okay, well, there isn't much bleeding now. It could just have been a second lining. So we're going to send you on your way. So I went home. Then the next day in the evening, the same thing happened again. I hemorrhage again. And my husband calls the hospital and says, what should we do? And I'm yelling, I'm not going back because the bleeding stopped. It was the same scenario as the day before. And it was pretty late at night by now. It was probably 9 or 9:30. And I said, I'm not going. And it was decided I see the doctor the next morning in Huntington Beach, California, where we lived at the time. And the next morning I see the doctor. He does a manual inspection and he says, well, it doesn't seem like much bleeding is going on now. No blood work, no ultrasound, nothing. And sends me on my way again. So now I've already hemorrhaged 2 times. And then late in the afternoon, guess what happens? I hemorrhage again. So back to the ER we go. The same routine. 2 doctors come in, probably the head physician and the resident physician, because one was a lot younger. And they do the manual inspection and they say, well, it's just a trickle of blood and we're going to keep you for observation. So there I am on this table in the ER, door is closed. I don't have a bell to ring. I have no way of calling for help, basically. So I'm lying on this table and I start bleeding again. So I'm starting to hemorrhage again. And at this point, I'm just thinking, well, I've already hemorrhaged twice. It's not a big deal. They're going to come check on me any moment. And so I'm lying on this table and, the papers are covered in blood at this point. And this is where the spiritual intervention starts happening, because I feel like that nurse, there was a nurse that opened the door to check on me. And her jaw just dropped when she saw that how much I had been bleeding. And the timing of that nurse check on me, I can only say that was the spiritual world sending her to check on me at that time. And I can hear the call on the loudspeaker, OBGYN, stat to the ER, OBGYN, stat to the ER. And I'm just thinking, wow, finally, they figured out something is wrong with me. So I'm not worried at all because I'm still feeling okay. And within, 30 seconds, probably, this middle-aged physician runs into my room and he quickly asks me, what's going on? And I said, this is, I hemorrhaged Wednesday, I hemorrhaged Thursday, I hemorrhaged again and at home, and then I came here and now I'm bleeding again. He said, okay. So he understood how much blood I had already lost, for 3 days I've been bleeding. So him and his young assistant, again, do a manual inspection. So they look to see, what's going on. And as they're doing this inspection, another very large blood clot comes out. And at this point, I start to feel weak. So I try to sit up, and I remember telling him, I don't feel good. And he knew at that point how much blood I had lost. So he just pushed me back down on the table. And at this point, my eyes were closing. I couldn't keep my eyes open. And I can hear the room filling with people, all giving orders to each other. And I have a nurse on my right that's putting the blood pressure cuff on. And I have a nurse on my left that's trying to place an IV. But at this point, my body's going into shock, right? So what happens when you go into shock, your veins start to collapse. So here I am lying on this table, and I feel like I just jumped out of an airplane, like free fall, which is probably my blood pressure just dropping at a very rapid speed. And I can hear the nurse on my right calling in my blood pressure. And at this one point, she just yells out, 50 over 15, hurry, she yells to the other people. And shortly after that I know that I'm dying. And this was a very different experience from being in the earthquake or hemorrhaging after the birth, where I thought I was going to die. And a lot of us have experiences like that, thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. You're almost in an accident. Yeah. But there was a knowing. I knew that I was dying at that point. And I'm thinking, what's taking this nurse so long? Why can't she get that IV in? Well, she was probably struggling for her life trying to get that to hit some kind of a blood vessel in there. And so at this point, I know that I'm dying. And the atheist that I am at that point, what do I do? Well, I was confirmed when I was 14. And so I said, well, if there is a God out there, that is my only hope at this point. And so I prayed to God to save my life. And I said, I have 3 children under the age of 6. They need a mother, right? Because I was thinking my husband can never do this. So I just knew that my children needed me in their life to have a mom that could love them unconditionally. And so I prayed to have my life saved. And it was shortly after that that I was pulled out of my body. But that feeling of being pulled out of the body, it was like coming on. When I knew that I was dying, I could feel that separation, as if something was separating out of my body, like something being pulled out. And so within a split second, I'm inside my body, and then in the next second, I am not. And I often get the question, how did you leave? Where did you leave? Did you leave from your crown chakra or heart chakra? I always tell people I have no idea, because one second you're inside your body, but the next second you are not. And I have no idea how you get to the other side, because it is instantaneous. And so you're just pulled out. But now I just find myself floating above my body, but I have no memory of seeing my body, just a knowing that my body was below me. You know how some people say they saw themselves, but I didn't see myself. It was more just a floating above my body and a knowing, oh, I'm outside my body. But the first thought I had was, how can I be outside my body and still be me? Because I had no belief system in place at all that this could even be possible. But what really shocked me was that I was still me. The way I identify with myself as, Lotte, this is who I am. That's who I was, but I was just outside my body, and I was still me. I was still myself, just without my body. And there was a knowing in this state that there was no time. And time somehow didn't matter, and that I could access past, present, and future all at the same time. And this is what drove me crazy for the years to come, where I searched the San Francisco Public Library for any kind of information on time. I would read Stephen Hawking's books on time. Why is there no time on the other side? What is this? But then you also have this experience of that unconditional love. There was just peace in this place that I was in this dimension, where there is no feelings of hurt. Everything is just, you just feel at peace. And then I got sucked back into my body as quickly as I had been sucked out. And that next day in the hospital room, I'm like lying hooked up to the blood pressure machines and IVs and who knows what. And I'm lying in this hospital bed, and in the left corner of my ceiling, I hear my sister-in-law, who had passed away about 2 weeks earlier from lung cancer. And I hear her, and I know it's her. And she says, everything is going to be okay. I'm still trying to come to terms with, what happened the day before? I'm thinking, what was that? How could I have this experience of being outside my body and that being as real or more real than my life here? And now I think I hear my sister-in-law talking to me, who passed away 2 weeks ago. And I was so afraid of sharing anything. And I think they sent me this Norwegian nurse to check on me. And I think the hospital staff, or at least some of them, knew of near-death experiences, but I had no knowledge of what had happened to me or what that experience was at all. I just thought, if I tell anyone, they're going to lock me up in the mental ward. I'll never see my kids again. So this nurse comes in to check on me, and she says, oh, how are you feeling today? And did you have any unusual experiences, or did anything happen in the emergency room yesterday? And I was so scared. I said, no, nothing happened. Everything is good. And just kind of brushed it over. But now thinking back, she was obviously aware that I might have had a near-death experience, but I was just too afraid at that point to bring it up.
Yeah. I often ask that question as a hospital chaplain myself, when someone had coded and then resuscitated.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting, because then it was, my parents changed their tickets back to Sweden. They had come to help with the birth several times. And I begged the doctor. So the first thing the doctor said after they revived me was, we have to give you blood. And I said, do you have to give me blood? And he's yelling at me, don't move. I was just trying to move my head. He was so afraid I was going to lose me again. And I said, well, everybody that gets getting a blood transfusion seems to be getting AIDS. And I don't want to find out 6 years from now that I have AIDS. I have 3 children under the age of 6. if there's anything you can do to not give me blood, then, let me know. And he's asked, do you have a religious belief that you can't take blood? And I said, no, if you have to give it to me, give it to me. And he said, well, you're young and healthy. I was 34 at the time. And the picture of health, I had just studied nutrition. I had a degree in nutrition. And, my diet was so healthy. And they said, we're going to monitor you and see how quickly you make blood. So even though I was at the level where they do give blood, they gave me a lot of supplements and things to build the blood. But it took me all of July and pretty much all of August to gain enough strength to sit up. So I mostly slept for the first 2 months after. And it was my mother-in-law who then released my parents to go home back to Sweden. And she came, and she was aware of near-death experiences. And so she said, what happened in the ER? And I told her about my experience. And she said, what you had is called a near-death experience. I'm going to go get you a book. So she came back with Life After Life by Raymond Moody.
Excellent.
So, right, it's a small world. And I know I have interviewed Raymond on my own podcast, but it's fascinating. And then, of course, I found PMH Atwater and all of her books. And eventually found my way to IANDS after many years. So, but
now you got pneumonia after that, though, didn't you?
Yeah. So then 6 months later, it took me 6 months to even be able to, walk one house to the left and one house to the right. And then we all got sick for Christmas. We all got the flu. We all got pneumonia. We didn't have medical insurance because my husband was in a new job. And we had that 3-month wait period. It's a great system we here in the United States, right? We did not have medical insurance that entire year because as I gave birth to my daughter, my husband's company was sold. Everybody got laid off, and he was a regional manager. So he just took any management position he could get to just bring in the money. And we were young, we were in our early 30s, and he's supporting the family. And then 3 months later, he would get another job offer and he would say, it's better money, it's a better job. And I said, just take it, just take it. And then the same thing happened again 2 more times that year. And so we just went to the walk-in clinic as we got sick that Christmas, and everybody got given, antibiotics. And after 8 days on antibiotics, I was just as sick as I was even sicker than I was 8 days earlier. So I went back to the walk-in clinic and they said, weren't you just here? And I said, yeah. Well, you should be well by now. And I was just really sick. So they said there's something else wrong with you. And they took a blood sample, and I was in this walk-in clinic for hours, like 3 hours. So they took this blood. They came back in and they said, you don't have an immune system. You have to go to the ER. Do you have leukemia or AIDS? And I said, well, I hope neither. I couldn't have AIDS because we didn't do the blood transfusion, and that's why it took so long for me to start building the blood back up. And they said, well, you have basically no white blood cells at all. And I said, well, I can't go to the ER because we don't have medical insurance. So they injected me with who knows what, and I lied on that table for another 2 hours to make sure I wasn't having any kind of reactions. Wow. And then they called me the next day and they said, how are you doing? You have to go to the ER if you get, just 1% worse. And somehow I managed to come out of that. But then I started bruising. So in May of 1993, which was now my daughter was 11 months, I bumped into the baby's changing table, and it would give you a bruise the size of a nickel. Well, I had a bruise that spanned my entire hip area, and it was purple and red. And my friends that saw it, one friend started crying and said, you're going to die. We can't lose you. And I said, well, I only have 2 months. We're going to get insurance July 1st. And this was in the middle of May. And I drove myself to the doctor, and I brought all 3 kids with me. I was actually better than I had been all year because I had the strength to drive myself to the doctor and bringing my children. And the doctor thought, he started listening to my lungs and he said, oh yeah, you have beginning pneumonia. And then he saw the big bruise, and he thought right away, he jumped in front of me and, said, who is abusing you? Somebody's beating you. And I said, nobody is hurting me, and told him the story. Well, he didn't believe me at first. So he pulled up the shirt on all three children. And of course, he didn't find any bruises. And I said, look, I'm telling you the truth. My father is a physician. Obviously, I understand that something is wrong with my blood, but I'm getting insurance July 1st. If I go now, I'm never going to get that insurance. So again, he gave me all the, steroids, antibiotics, and inhalers. And again, I managed to pull out of that. But I lived that life for about 6 years. So by the fall, my bruises were smaller. But if I put my knee on the floor to tie my children's shoes, I would get a bruise. If I just hit my finger, slightly on the dishwasher, let's say, my whole finger would turn blue. So I was bruising very easily. So now I know that I had. It was a bone marrow suppression. And that's what my doctor told me once I fessed up to my doctor many, many years later. But it took about 6 years. I didn't function well. And I always felt like my soul was jumping out or leaving. And it was this constant feeling. And I would say, no, we're not leaving. Come back, my soul. It was the same feeling of the separation that I had during my near-death experience. And I would have
During that time, Lotte, did you have any communication from the other side, or was it just you fighting your body, trying to keep your soul inside?
So it already started. It already had started. So, the first day after, I heard my sister-in-law, and then a year later, my uncle had passed away, but I didn't know. I knew he had lung cancer, but nobody had told me how he was doing, and he had already been having it for many years. He was a smoker in his youth, but he hadn't smoked in over 20 years. And in the middle of the night, so this is about 16 months after the birth of my daughter, and in the middle of the night, I wake up. And I know it's my uncle. I can't see him. At that point, I couldn't see the spirit world, but I knew they were there, and I knew who it was. And I knew it was my uncle. And he said, I've come to say goodbye. I'm just checking in, letting you know I'm passing over. And the next day, it was my mom's brother in Sweden. And I expected my mom to call me the next day. And nobody called me. And I said, wow, this is so strange. And then another day went by. Nobody called. And then finally, on Wednesday, she called and she said, oh, I'm just checking in. How are you doing? And how's the kids? And then finally she says, oh, I have some sad news to share with you. And I said, yeah, I know. Your brother passed away 3 days ago. And it was just dead silence. And my mom said, how did you know? And I said, he was here. He came to say goodbye. And her response to that was, wow, you're just like your grandmother, her mom. Oh. So there's something there about that spirituality, and that she also had it, and it sort of skipped a generation, or maybe my mom just never tuned into it.
I've seen that in other families, that it seems to be like an ability that is genetically passed on. Tell us about your next NDE and how that happened.
Right. So then I was really sick, right? I couldn't stand up long enough to cook pancakes for my kids. So I remembered my 90-year-old grandma had a stool in the kitchen next to her stove. So I said, that's the solution. So I had a stove. I had a stool in the kitchen so that I could cook for my kids. And I always had that feeling of the soul wanting to leave the body. And that was just my existence at that point. Because I was just really sick. I didn't have enough blood in my body. So I didn't have enough. Well, I probably did not have any blood, enough of any of them at that point, because I was just getting, every 6 months I would get sick. It didn't matter if it was summer or winter, I would get pneumonia. So we know that the white blood cells were suppressed. We know that I was anemic and exhausted. And we knew that I had platelet suppression because I would bruise so easily. If I just knew then what I know now, I would have gone to the doctor. Every time I went to the doctor and got pneumonia, they always knew that there was something deeper wrong with me, and they always wanted me to do the blood work. But I would never go back to the same doctor, because I knew that I was getting better. Even though I was still sick, I was progressing in the right direction. And with my father being a physician, I knew that all the medications they would give me would probably hurt me more if my body could just take the time to heal. And as long as I wasn't getting worse, I was on that track. So I often woke up in the middle of the night with, my head pounding. I would have to take my head off the pillow and feel like my soul is leaving again. And it was just this struggle that I'm always holding on to my soul or saying, we're not leaving, we're staying here. And so this second NDE happened in the middle of the night. And I woke up, as I did many nights, my head pounding, take my head off the pillow and say, no, we're not leaving, we're staying. But just like in the ER, it was a split second and I was out of my body again. But this second NDE is really what activated my life path. And what this NDE is about is really what has become my work today. And so I always joke that they saved me too quickly the first time. And so now we got to do it again to give you the full effect so that you can become the person you incarnated to be. And so I get pulled out of my body, but the second time, it's more like a Star Wars movie where I just tumble through darkness. It's just this feeling of tumbling through darkness, but I don't see anything. It's just black. But then I get to this, what I call the mid station, because for some reason I had this feeling or knowing that there were different levels. I ended up at this level, just as if you go into a skyscraper with 100 floors and you push the button on the 50th floor. When you get off on the 50th floor, there are levels above you and there's levels below you. You don't know what's on those floors because you're not on that floor. But it was that feeling as if, and I still wonder what's on those other levels. Maybe you can tell me. Maybe you have had people have seen that. But it was just this feeling I was at this level to have, that was my experience. I could go higher. Maybe if you go higher, you don't come back. But I call it the bouncing station only because I wasn't given a choice to stay. I was sent back. But I get to this place, but the first thing I experience is the most beautiful music you could ever imagine. And it's not, I sat at our synthesizer for a week trying to find one sound. And we had one of those big Roland synthesizers that had probably over 200 sounds. There was not one sound that sounded as beautiful as the music that I heard. So it's more beautiful than anything we can imagine here on the earth plane. And so I'm, wondering, where is this beautiful music coming from? And what I see is a log cabin. And I love how we all see the different things. And I always wonder if it's just what we're comfortable with, because I grew up in Sweden. It's almost like a little log cabin sauna, right? Just this little tiny log cabin. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking, thinking, maybe it's coming from there. So I open the door, I look inside, but it's empty. So then I look to my left, and it's literally a mirror image of what I see on the right. So I open the door, look inside, but it's empty. And I'm still wondering, where is this music coming from? But then I become aware of this light, almost as if you went to a sports arena and somebody all of a sudden turned on the spotlight and you're like, wow, where is this light coming from? And you turn around and you see that spotlight. But so I become aware of this very bright white light. And as I turn around, it's more like a spotlight in a dense white fog, because that light just fills everything. It's just everywhere. But then in this light, there is an outline of angels, and the music is coming from the angels. But I'm completely aware of the fact that I don't believe in angels. But that is my experience at the moment, right? So I'm doubting what it is that I'm experiencing at the same time as I'm experiencing it. But there's also this knowing that that light is God or divine source or whatever you want to call it. But we come from that light. And that we carry that light. We're part of that light. We carry that divine light within us. We're part of it. And that when we leave this earth plane, we go back to this divine source, to this bright white light that is nothing but unconditional love. It's just, love and light, which is what I put at the end of all my emails, because it's who we are at the core of our beings. We are this love and light. And when we go through life, I think we just forget about that we are this light and that we're connected to the light. But then I become aware of two spirit guides. And the spirit guide on my right is communicating with the other spirit guide diagonally to the left in front of me. And the spirit guide says, what is she doing here? She can't be here. She has to go back, as if, I crossed some barrier or something. And so my response is, no, wait a second. How can this be? How can I be outside my body and still be me? It's already been bothering me for over 2 years now. Like, I'm still trying to come to terms with the first experience. And here I am again outside. And the spirit guide on my left says, well, if I told you, you wouldn't remember. So there is some switch off mechanism of some sort, but you will remember this, he says. And then it's like I'm standing on the moon. And I've heard other people talk about it's like a movie screen appear. And I think that's a really good explanation, because all of a sudden you just see this thing in front of you. Who knows how it gets there? But it's as if I'm standing on the moon looking down on the earth. The earth is way down there. And that, whatever that's just what they're projecting to me. Mm-hmm. But around the earth, I see this silvery, glittery, what I call the fishnet at the time. So, this is back in 1994. So we don't have the internet. We can't Google grid around the earth. This is another reason I spent years at the San Francisco Public Library. What is this grid? What is it that I saw? Right? I couldn't search on Google back then, and I never found it in the San Francisco Public Library. So I'm seeing this glittery fishnet, and I called it the fishnet because I grew up in Sweden, and my grandmother would lay fishnets in the ocean, and I finally graduated to be the rower. I was a very proud moment, and I got to row this little boat for my grandmother. But when she lifted up the fishnets, they're diamond shaped, and when the water droplets glitter on the fishnet in the morning sunlight, that's what it looked like to me, right? Because I had never seen grid around the earth, right? Because we didn't have Google. So I see this fishnet around the earth, and the spirit guide says, everything on earth is connected to each other, but everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that information, I got sent back. And so for years, right, I had a lot of after effects too, the classical watches stop and all that. But for years and years and years, searched for that. And eventually I found IANDS around 2000, and around 2002, maybe 2002. And then in 2004, 12 years after my first near-death experience, my watch finally ticked for 12 months. And I said, that's it. I have regained my health. My watch ticked for 12 months. That's it. I'm healed. And I just dropped everything at that point, because I had spent years at this point for about 4 years, since 2000, because we moved to San Francisco in 2000. And I started searching in the library for what is that grid? Why is there no time on the other side? And I could never get a good explanation, and just said, okay, that's it. I'm stopping here.
Yeah. Do you suppose from what you saw that, some people claim that our life on Earth is not real, that it's a fantasy, but you're saying that everything is connected, and that includes life on Earth as well as the spiritual world?
Yes, we're all connected. We are all connected to each other, right? And we're connected to the animals, the trees, the grass, the sun, the moon, the stars, our ancestors in the spirit world, other dimensions of beings and spirit guides and spirit animals. And it all ties in together, because we have the illusion of being separate, but that's also because we're living this lesson in this life, which sometimes I feel is not as random as we think, because the astrologers that I have worked with, I've been told several times that I had more near-death experiences than I remember, but because they can see it in my astrological chart. And so there, all this, I would say, spiritual downloads of what I came to do in my life. I know I'm here as a healer. I know I'm here to work physically, emotionally, and spiritually with people. And that grid around the earth, it really didn't make sense to me until 4 or 5 years ago. It's such a long journey. We have to go through, it's a life journey for a reason, because many times we think that things are going to happen next year, but it's really 5 years. It's a slow process to be alive on Earth and go through the different phases, because we are also tied into the planets. And, the way, our mind gets refreshed, our blood supply gets refreshed. Everything is tied into our own existence, which is tied into the other planets and everything else.
So are you saying the grid is the physical example of our connectedness?
Yeah, so I think, well, we are connected in many different ways. We're connected via the DNA from our ancestors. So that's the physical connection. But then we're connected through quantum physics. So the people that received the Nobel Prize back in 2022, 23, the three physicists that proved the connectivity between the atoms, even if the atoms have never met, but the entanglement of atoms itself. But that is also the entanglement that we have with our own past lives and our ancestors' lives. So I work a lot with ancestral healing now, where it has become a blend of ancestral healing is actually a form of counseling. So I trained in that after I graduated from med school. And again, it was just, I'm so spiritually guided. I get a lot of clients, and I get guided by my own clients. And I was doing mediumship readings, and I had three or four readings in a row that were almost identical, where I would say, your grandmother is here, and she had a really hard life. And I see that she was, physically abused by your grandfather. Does you understand this? Yes. And then your mother, I see three children. Your mother is one of them, and she married your father, but your father was also physically abusive, and he also abused you. Is that correct? Yes. And I had three or four readings in a row that was almost identical. And so that's what led me into then finding my way to ancestral healing and studying under Mark Wolin, who has been doing this. He is the founder of the Constellation Institute in San Francisco. And I studied under him with 200 other physicians and counselors around the world during the pandemic. It was the first time he taught online. And that taught me to see the patterns in a counseling way. But then what that is now integrated with is my mediumship as well. And so sometimes when I work with people to resolve their trauma or resolve their issues, and the issues could be almost anything, but that is tied back to our ancestors. And we know that we inherit trauma on the DNA. Now we have identified genes. There's a lot of research from Holocaust survivors, and they can see the genes are transferred down even to grandchildren. So you might have a grandpa that survived the war, and every time he heard the sirens go off, he would have a fear that he was going to die that day. So his epigenetics code for different genes to prepare the offspring to be fearful of the signals, right? And these are research that has been done on mice as well. And so we know it's passed down via DNA, but we're also entangled via quantum physics, that energetic grid, right? And so we're all part of each other. We resonate and entrain with everything. And you can look at Stephen Herod Booner's work of how he says we resonate and entrain with everything, whether it has a heart or not, right? The trees, the plants, because we give off a signal, right? That's how we measure our EKG. We're electrical beings underneath all this. And that's how we measure brain waves and heart and all of that. But that also means we send out signals to other people. And, we are these magnetic electrical beings that have communication with each other. Even if we don't say anything, we know when somebody's following us on the street or if there's bad intentions, etc.
How did you train yourself to be this empathetic with what's around you?
So I went to med school when I was 54. And after 12 years of listening to the spirit world and being told, this family member is sick, or this family member is going to pass away, and you're going to be in a car accident, it looks like this, and all these experiences together with, my watch is stopping and television's turning on. And it was an electrical mess for a while. And after those 12 years, I was looking to go back to work. I had been a programmer and systems analyst for IBM in my youth, and then stayed home with my kids for a number of years, studied nutrition. And I knew I had to go back and work as a healer. I always knew I was a healer, but never followed my path because my father was a physician. My mom became a hospital floor administrator. One of my brothers became a surgeon. All my parents' friends were doctors and nurses. So I was surrounded by medicine my whole life. And I always knew I was a healer. I worried about people in the grocery store and wondered why they were limping, or why is that old man bent over? I wonder what happened to his back. That was just part of who I was. I incarnated being that empathic person. I was always looking out for other people in school. I protected other children that were bullied. I would literally stick up to the boys and, put my little fists up like Annie and say, "You don't mess with my friend." And I would, pass the worst player. I was very good in sports, but I would pass the ball to the worst player on the team just so that they would have a chance to also shoot a basket, or at least try. So that was just who I came to the world, being that empathic person. But then I moved to the United States. I got married to an American, and I never pursued it because of the language barrier. It was too great. And so I majored in business and computer science because it was easier. The English was easier than the science classes. So here I am, going back, thinking I'm going to go back to work. And I found this medical school, and I said, I can't go to medical school. I'm already in my 40s. What are you thinking? Even if I took all the prereqs of chemistry, organic chemistry, there's no guarantee I'm going to get in. I'm going to be older. They might even have cutoffs saying, forget it. So I closed my computer, walked to the kitchen, and the spirit world drops in. But now it's been 12 years of me listening to the spirit world. And I know that every message I had gotten for 12 years that I had either told my kids, my husband, written down on a piece of paper, I knew that they always were true. And so the spirit world drops in and says, give me 3 messages. And they said, you have to go to medical school and become a doctor. You have to combine like East and West, old and new. And you're bringing messages and healing to the people. And you're to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And I said, what are you talking about writing a book? I have never written anything my whole life. And the only responses I would get from the spirit world was, when the time is right, we'll let you know. What do you mean bringing messages to the people? What are you talking about? When the time is right, we will let you know. And the message was just focus on getting your prereqs done so you can go to medical school. And I was also told that I needed the degree for what I was to do, and that I wasn't supposed to work as a doctor full time. It was just, I needed that degree for the work I was going to do. And so blindly, I enrolled at the community college and started my prereqs. And then years later, I went to medical school. And as soon as I graduated, the funny part of all of this is that the first IANDS conference I was able to attend was, I think it was summer 2015. I was a 3rd-year medical school student, and it was in San Antonio, Texas. The speaker was Suzanne Giesemann, and I knew about her, and Anita Morjani was there. And I had lunch with PMH Atwater and all the people I had followed and learned about to develop my own spirituality. And I'm in the audience, and Suzanne Giesemann puts up a slide, and she says, this is the college in England I studied at. It's called Arthur Findlay College. And immediately the spirit world drops in and says, you have to go and study there. And I'm arguing with the spirit world as I'm in the audience. I can't go there. I'm a 3rd-year medical school student. I have to graduate. And then I have to take my boards, and then I have to make money to pay off my student loans. And the message was just very clear. And I was just, no, stop telling me I have to go there. Well, then I graduated 2016, took my boards in August. And in September, you're still waiting for the license because you don't get the results back until the 1st week of October. So I'm studying craniosacral therapy with the Upledger Institute. And I meet this woman and we have dinner. And she says, I'm a medium and somebody is here who wants to give you a message. And even though I've been through all this, listened to the spirit world for all these years, I still did not believe that she could bring in a message from one of my relatives that was going to be correct. So I said, okay, all right, I'm ready, thinking that there's no way she's going to get anything right. I was brought up in Sweden. It's such a different culture. I'm not from here. And she starts talking, and I know it's my mom. And she talks about the fishing and rowing the boat. I said, okay, I get it. It's my mom. And she said, your mom says that you have to go to Arthur Findlay College and study mediumship. And I said, I can't go there. I just graduated. And she says, do you even know what that is? And I said, funny enough, I do,
Mhm.
because of the year before I had been to the conference.
Yeah.
And sure enough, 6 months later, there I was at Arthur Findlay College. And then that is what opened the doors to be a medium for other people and bring in messages for other people. But that's also, it wasn't until I was at Arthur Findlay College when the teacher said, we are the people that are bringing the messages and the healing to the people. I finally understood what the spirit world had meant, back in 2004, and now it's 2017, that I finally was able to put that together. And then the message about the book, when I had my first reading with the teachers at Arthur Findlay College, she said, your mom is here and she's telling me you're writing a book. I started writing it as soon as I graduated. And I said, well, actually, yes, I am. I don't have much material yet. It's more of an outline. And she said, okay, well, your mom says that you're to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And I have gotten that exact message 4 times from 4 different mediums. So there's 2 more books coming. But it also gives confirmation to my own experience. And I feel a lot of my experiences are, the spirit world knows I need a lot of confirmations because I was raised that with my very scientific father. And I need a lot of confirmation to trust in the spirit world. But now with all those confirmations, it also helps me to teach other people and help heal other people.
Give us a quick picture of Arthur Findlay College and what the kinds of courses they teach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Arthur Findlay College teaches a lot of mediumship courses. I would say probably at least half of the courses they teach are mediumship. And the people that teach at Arthur Findlay College are probably the top mediums in the world. They've done thousands and thousands and thousands of readings before they can teach there. It's a very rigorous program that they go through to become a spiritual minister. And in England, it's very different because they do readings. It's a much more spiritual country where spiritualism is much more readily accepted compared to Sweden or the United States. And then they also teach some courses in shamanism and also healing, different healing, as well as trance healing. I've studied trance healing there as well.
Now, there's a group of very powerful mediums. Do you know if they have gotten together to take a look at the world's future?
No, but that would be really interesting.
Seems like
I think
with all that power in one place, that maybe
right.
they could get some, critical information about our environment and our social patterns and what our future is going to amount
Right.
to.
I think that we're going towards, we're raising consciousness. So we are elevating consciousness as a whole of the earth, which is why there is so much people going back to the roots of who they are, studying old traditional healing methods, looking to the Amazon, people looking to shamanism, looking to spirituality, where people are tuning into, the greater. We are such greater beings. I mean, we're like living miracles, really, right? And we have so much more capacity. But I feel like there's such an interest in spirituality and tuning into the other realms and the other dimensions, as well as the spirit world, that we're all helping to drive, as well as you with your podcast for many, many years, is bringing that awareness that there's something greater that we can't easily tap into unless we help ourselves develop that. But we are, according to the old Mayan traditions and the spiritual people and Aborigine people, we are in a transition right now, right? That started in the early 1990s, I think, 92 or so. And now for the next 80 years, we're going through that transition. But we're also going to see these transitions in the world. And numerology wise, we're in 8 year this year. So it's all about power, right? And we can see the greed and the power in the world and how people are protesting around the world for the greed and the power, because we are in charge of our life here on earth. Only we, the people, can change the world. And if we don't like the world, then you have to step up to the plate and make a change. But even if you only make a change in yourself, that's what I tell people. If I can help you heal, or if you can heal yourself, your vibrational frequency is going to change. But when your vibrational frequency changes because you become healed, you're also going to affect all the people and all the trees and all the animals that are connected to you. You know, it's just like the green thumb people. Why does that person's flowers, they have a green thumb? Yeah, they talk to their plants, they pet their plants, they care for their plants, and the plants grow and be really big. It's not any different. We're the same as people. And so many people are, you know, traumatized. They were not treated right as children, and they were not seen, they were not heard, etc. But then that creates, it kind of puts a little shell around them. But once they can create healing for that, and they can blossom and find their true spirit within themselves and find that inner light that we all have, then, you know, nothing becomes impossible, because we are these amazing spiritual creatures that are just waiting to open our flowers to bloom.
Talk a little about some of the cases you've been able to help with your abilities.
Oh, so many. It depends what I do, right? So I do trance healings and ancestral healings, but there are people, you know, that have physical illnesses, and those are always the ones I feel like it's always a miracle when people heal. But once you create healing for it, it could be somebody, I'm thinking of a nurse she was a nurse, she's probably in her 70s or 80s now, colitis for many, many years. And she came back a year later. She said, I want to do another ancestral healing. And I said, how did it go after the first one? And she says, you know, I haven't had any problems with my colitis since I saw you a year ago. Right. And so what is it that happens? What is it that happens when we create healing? And why is it that some people will have an immediate healing? I've done trance healings across the world, where I worked with somebody here in the United States who was originally from India, and her father-in-law was really sick in India. And she said, I want you to do a healing when I'm visiting them. And he had been a healthy person who was, you know, he was skinny, he wasn't overweight or anything. And all of a sudden he got really sick. And I had to walk with a walker, and he was in and out of the hospital, and nobody really knew what was wrong with him. And that's what was so frustrating to her. And so when she was there, we did a healing. So we had the man in the hospital bed, and the daughter-in-law on one side of the bed, and the patient's wife on the other side. And we just did a trance healing on him. And during that healing, I got the message that, so this was in January, it was in January 2023. And I got the message that by June, July, he was going to be well. I was like, I have no idea how this is going to work, but that's the message. So I'm just a messenger. So I said, it's all gonna, it seems like, you know, nobody knew what was wrong with him, and he couldn't work. He had to leave work. And I said, I got the message that by June, July, he's supposed to be well, and he's going to be back to work. So it's going to be stages now this spring of stages going up the steps sort of creating healing. And sure enough, that last summer, July 2023, the daughter-in-law writes to me and she says, thank you. My father-in-law has been released from the hospital. He's completely well, and he's back to work. I mean, that's not me. That's the spirit world. That's how I look at it. I'm never the person who heals the people. And I'm just the person who connects them, or who knows how it works, but right. I'm just a messenger. But I know that I had a reading about my Mayan calendar, and she said, you're the link. She said, you're the link between the spirit world and the people. So that's what I tell people. I'm just the link, but let's go. Let's see if we can create healing. And sometimes it's ancestral healing becomes a little bit more like counseling, but many times I work with psychotherapists, counselors, physicians, because they also don't want to go to a regular counselor and have everything recorded, because it can jeopardize their license. Maybe, I don't know how it all works, but they don't want to go that normal route. And when we look at the ancestral picture, and I say, this is, what you're struggling with comes from here, it comes from your mom, or this comes from your dad. And they just look at me and they say, I do this all day long for other people. Why couldn't I see it for myself? Because I feel like many times we're blinded. I think it's the same for all of us, that it's more difficult to create healing for ourselves than it is for us to see somebody else and what's wrong. If that person could just do that, or if that person would just open up to this. But it's harder to see it for ourselves, because I see it with people who do it for a profession. They have a hard time finding it too.
Can you do this from a distance, or do you have to be with a person that you're helping?
Yeah, no, I work on Zoom. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, because we are all linked to the spirit world. We're all connected to divine source and to each other and to everything that's out there. And when all we have to do is tap into that and link it. It's like linking it up. It's like Wi-Fi.
Edgar Cayce didn't even have Zoom, and he was able to heal at a distance. How would people who would like to reach you go about doing that?
My website is drlotte.com, and it says drlotte.com, drlotte.com. And on there, you can schedule, one-to-one sessions, and I do many different sessions: medical medium, remote health consulting, ancestral healing, messages from your spirit guides, which is very fun. And that's typically about who the person incarnated to be in this life, like what are they here to do? Sometimes we get lost along the way, and many other different types of sessions. I also have online self-study courses that I just released about a few weeks ago. It's called Connecting with Your Spirit Team, and it's about 3 hours long. It's 8 modules, but I take you from the beginning, because I get this question so many times from people. How do I connect with the spirit world? How do I connect with my spirit guides? How do I connect with my spirit animals? How do I know if it's my higher self or divine consciousness? So I take them in the 8 different modules, step by step, in the order that I wished I had been presented the material. I learned everything backwards, and it would have been a lot easier if I had gone this route, because each level brings you up one notch until you get to the last module. And then I'm also I regularly teach ancestral healing. So I teach for the Theosophical Society as well. And I have different ones, and I'm developing for HemiSync. I'm a collaborator with HemiSync. And we just had a release that just came up with Unlocking the Doorway to Self-Realization. And then one is a mother wound, and one is relationship wounds. And I try to teach people how to connect to that so that they can create healing for themselves. And I will be teaching the mother wound class live online on June 8th, 2024. And that is a really good class, because I think 99% of us carry a mother wound, and we don't see it as a mother wound, because some of us look at our mothers and say, I love my mom. My mom was perfect, like I did when I studied ancestral healing. And then I listened and I said, okay, now I understand that even when you think you have a perfect mother, there is also things to learn about that. So I think everybody could benefit from a mother wound class, because it is so many issues that we carry through life that are actually stem from a mother wound, not being seen and heard in your relationship, having financial issues. A lot of things come from the mother wound. So that is the best way. And then also don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. I will also be at the IANDS conference this year in Phoenix, Arizona, and I will be working as a healer one day, and I will also be the lead panelist for the after effects of near-death experience, because I had all the watches stopping and the televisions turning on and all those things that happened. So
Lotte, have you ever thought of going back to the San Francisco Library and planting some of this informational material so that people could take the shortcut that you didn't have?
Well, I know that's funny you say that. I would definitely have to do that next time I go there. I'm going to say, you need these books here. But now we also have, we have your podcast, and we have so many things online, which is so helpful. Because there's so many people out there that are going to have near-death experiences, and it's only going to be more as medicine advances. We're just constantly going to be reviving people, and this work is so important to get this message out to people, because everybody's going to either they're going to know somebody who had a near-death experience.
Yes, yes. Thousands a day around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Lotte, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been great. It's been fun talking with you, and I think this is going to be a big help to our listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Well, my thanks to Dr. Lotte Valentin for sharing some of the spiritual experiences from her fascinating life. If listeners would like to hear this show again or any of our more than 500 archived ad-free NDE interviews, go to TalkZone's NDE Radio site and hit the Past Shows button, or go to our YouTube channel, NDE Radio with Lee Witting, where you can subscribe to and comment on the complete NDE Radio library. And be sure to check out our NDE Radio Facebook page. Just search NDE Radio with Lee Witting on your Facebook app. And listen next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern at TalkZone for more NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting, saying thanks for listening.